Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to show you how to master the most difficult move in golf. Thanks to YouTube and modern teaching, I think amateur golfers understand more about a golf swing nowadays than they have ever done. But that doesn't really make it any easier. It just means you understand why you can't hit it, whereas before you didn't know why. So what I want to tell you today, or help you with today, is probably the most difficult movement in golf. And that is basically getting your upper body to go into a side bend while rotating in the downswing. This is one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult move in the golf swing. Now I know in the past we've talked about starting the transition with your lower body, getting your hips out of the way, turning your hips and getting the trail shoulder down. But the combination of these movements for the upper body is extremely difficult. You have your hips working on a relatively flat plane, whereas your shoulders should be working on a relatively steep plane. And the only way to do that is to get your body arching as you come down. Unfortunately, what we see far too much of nowadays, though, is people arching, getting the side bend in, but not getting the rotation in. And this is because when you start to contract your stomach muscles and your back muscles in order to get this side bend, it will more often than not lead to your hips sliding, which is one of the reasons as you start the downswing, you've got to get your hips rotating a moment before you get the crunch starting. Because if the hips have done nothing and you start crunching, you're going to slide. The trick to this is basically, unfortunately, repetition, but it's also a question of feedback. How in the world are you going to know you're doing it correctly? Now, what I like to do with my students is get them doing a lot of drills at home, and I think this drill everybody has seen if you've been watching my stuff for long enough, is I get them into this kind of address position with their arms across the chest, and then I try to get them kind of standing opposite a stick, or if they're not on the driving range, they're at home, doing this on the wall or on the side of a door, and basically then turning and making sure that they don't wander out of the rotation, and as they come back down, making sure that they don't go back behind the door or clatter their head into the door as they start the downswing. This is a movement that a lot of people just don't feel when they're doing it. So you need some feedback when you're actually swinging a golf club. And this means when you're actually got a golf club in your hand, also having some feedback when you're doing it. And that's why, again, I would take an alignment stick, shove it into the ground so that it's pointing up at your face, and try and get yourself standing with your head slightly to the side, so it's pointing at your trail ear. And what you want to be looking at is when you're making your swing, that you are not going back behind the stick as you follow through. And this could actually be the reason in the past that you've been, especially if you've been catching the ground before the ball, or you're finding you're kind of block slicing everything out. Getting this shoulder rotation down is unfortunately not going to be enough to close the club face unless you flip it. So a lot of these kind of block slices are caused by a deep trail shoulder and too little rotation in the axis. So by getting a stick in the ground, you're actually going to get some more feedback about when you're doing this. Now, obviously you can practice this with any club in the bag. I will sometimes do this with a wedge, and I'll actually put the stick in the ground so that I can only just see the ball on the left side of the stick, and then I will hit shots, and that way I can see if the stick suddenly covers the ball in the downswing. But generally it's quite okay to just take a 7-iron like I've got here, stand so that you can see the stick in your peripheral vision, and then just make your standard swing, and you should be able to see if you were to go backwards on it. I'll just try and do one incorrectly, and you see what kind of consequences that can have. On the other hand, stay over it, and suddenly the ball's got its correct trajectory. This can be responsible for all kinds of poor shots, but primarily you're going to be hitting it fat. You're going to be hitting it for a right-handed golfer to the right, for a left-handed golfer to the left. Get yourself with the feeling of staying stable in the downswing, not letting the trail leg give way, staying over the ball, especially with the irons, and stable through impact. Keep that trail ear in front of the stick when you're swinging, and suddenly you're going to have far more crisp strikes of the golf ball with this one simple tip. Hope you liked it. If you did, as ever, hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done it already. Thanks again to all of my patrons. If you would like to support the channel, you can subscribe to Patreon and send me a little bit every month, and that will get me back a little bit more often. Otherwise, I'll be back next week anyway. See you then.